It's amazing how your life can go from heaven to hell in a single second, just because of human ignorance. That's what happened to these guys who, after releasing one of the most famous hits of the 2000s, were banned and received death threats. And they almost had their dreams destroyed if it weren't for one detail that saved their skins. Today, I'm going to tell you the story behind the song Chop Suey by System of a Down. I'm Guilherme, and you're watching DECIFRAHITS. If the weird name wasn't enough, the lyrics are really hard to understand. And the meaning is so enigmatic that people are still debating it. Even today, 23 years after the release of this song. But what are healthy debates today back then were really violent arguments. I'm talking about real attacks and threats against the band members' lives. If you're a fan of the band, you must be worried, wondering what these guys who are so cool did to be treated this way. They were basically the gateway for a lot of people into the world of rock. Is it possible to hate these guys? Yeah, my friend, you better believe it. And that's why you should never doubt human ignorance. Chop Suey, one of the most iconic songs in modern metal, was created in a pretty chill way. The year was 2000, and the band was traveling in a van down a deserted road, going from city to city, promoting their first album, the self-titled System of a Down from '98. At that time, the band didn't have even 1% of the fame they have today, but they were about to change that in a very unexpected way. Darren Malakian, the guitarist, was alone on a bed in the back of the van, improvising some melodies with his guitar, when suddenly he found himself playing what would become the nostalgic introduction to Chop Suey. That riff really reminds me of that little town from Diablo 1, you know? I know it's not really related, but it was one of my favorite games then, and that was an amazing time. But Chop Suey wasn't born the same way we know it today. Well, the chorus was the same, and the melody too, but the lyrics that Darren wrote started in a completely different way. Tell me what you think about tomorrow. Will there be a printed sadness? Tell me what you think about people. Will there be another sequence? Darren knew that the cadence was good, but he felt that the lyrics could still be improved. So he decided to show the song to the vocalist Serge Tankian, who changed the lyrics to fit his style. And that's how the first verses of Chop Suey came about, just as we know them today.
Wake up, Grand Rush and put a little makeup. I just set the fade away to shake up.
Now tell me honestly, how did you sing this part of the song? I'll explain to you what he's saying there in a moment. And no, it's not Timothy. But for you to understand the lyrics, it's best to start with the title. After all, judging by the comments in our community tab, this is one of the things you most want to know about this song. So, Chop Suey is the name of a dish from Chinese cuisine, made with meat and vegetables. I've never eaten it, but it looks like yakisoba, so it must be tasty. In fact, in the music video, O appears eating Chop Suey with the fans. They probably only included that scene so the song's title wouldn't go unnoticed, since it doesn't appear anywhere else in the lyrics. But the real reason why they chose this title has nothing to do with food, and actually, it's pretty heavy. The original title of the song was Suicidal, so much so that in the album version, right at the very beginning of the song, you can hear Serge Tankian saying this here, which means we're recording the suicidal one. But that was a potentially provocative title. Those are Darren's words. Many say that the record label Columbia Records pressured the band to change the title, which Darren denied. No one pressured us. We thought, this is going to be the first single from our second album. Do we really want to give the radio stations any reason? Not to play it was a smart thought, but he had no idea that this reason would come. And in a way, in a really absurd way, which you'll soon understand. Chop means to cut in English, and what Darren did was simply take the word suicide and chop, cut it in half, and that's how the title Chop Suey was born. But besides that, Darren also remembered the gangster movies he used to watch as a kid. It was something they used to say in the movies. We're going to chop him up, and that connected with this whole theme of death. Even though it seems random, the title still helps to understand the group's sound and musical style, which, just like the dish chop suey, is a mix of various sounds that fit together very well. This is represented in the music video when the band members start passing through each other, and also in the melody itself. Just look at the band's incredible skill in being able to flow from this.
Think you trust in my
For this.
angels deserve to die.
And for this.
In me, in your eyes, forsaken me.
In the same song, in such a natural and melodic way. But this mix doesn't stop there, it goes even further. When you analyze the lyrics, you realize that it doesn't have just one, but several layers of interpretation. One of them is that the song talks about suicide. But this word here isn't just in the abrupt sense of that act. They also use it in a metaphorical way to refer to anyone who has a disorder or addiction, like drugs, alcohol, or even eating disorders. In most cases, the person is fully aware that the addiction can lead them to death, but often they don't get enough support to break free from it. And even worse, the people around them judge them as if they're in that situation because they want to be. And because of that, if the person has a tragic ending, people will say they deserved it. And that's what the band talks about in the chorus, written by Darren Malakian Musica.
Think you trust in
They separate themselves from themselves. If you don't think you believe in my self-righteous suicide, I cry when angels deserve to die. Self-righteous doesn't have a very exact translation into Portuguese. It depends a lot on the context. Some translate it as moralist, hypocrite, or arrogant. But self-righteous is basically that person who believes their ideas and behaviors are morally correct and superior. But here this expression is used in the sense of someone who sacrifices themselves for the protection or benefit of another person. For example, when someone jumps in front of a bullet to save someone else's life, that person would be seen as a hero or an angel. And that's why the first line of the chorus is said in an ironic way to criticize the difference in judgment made by society. As Darren Malakian said in an interview, it's about how we as humans judge people, even when it comes to someone's death. For example, if someone died in a car accident and was drunk, we would judge them. If I died now from substance abuse, people would say I deserved it because I abused drugs. And that's where the line comes from. I cry when angels deserve to die, meaning angels are just ordinary people who are victims of their own circumstances, addictions, and disorders. They didn't want to be in that situation and are just as healthy and sacred as anyone else. But even so, we judge them by the circumstances of their death and not by who they were in life. But as I said, this song has other interpretations, especially because it wasn't written only by Darren, but also by Serj Tankian, who starts the first verse in that way only he knows how to sing.
wake up, grab brush and put a little makeup. I just have to fade away the shake up.
Wake up, grab a brush, and put on some makeup. Hide the scars to cover up the damage. Despite the upbeat tone in the band's happy faces, in these lines they're describing something very sad and, unfortunately, very real. They're describing a person who tries to hide their past and their problems so that others think they're okay. Yeah, that's Serj's happy face and Darren's creepy smile. It wasn't to scare your grandma, and it wasn't to make your mom think you were listening to the devil's music either. These guys are amazing artists, and this performance in the music video perfectly delivers the message they want to convey in the song. Anyone who suffers from some kind of disorder or violence on a daily basis knows how hard it is to wake up every day and be forced to put on a mask, a fake smile, to pretend that everything is fine and be able to go to school, to work, or simply live in society. Since people simply aren't prepared to see your scars, your traumas, without judging you, belittling you, or humiliating you even more. Because of that, they act as if they were perfect. And here, this voice telling him to wake up, put on some makeup, and hide the scars, it could very well be the voice of society. Or even your own inner voice, which just repeats these commandments as a way of surviving. Why did you leave the keys on the table? Go on, make up another story. It was your choice. Here, that voice of judgment gets even stronger. The person can't stand living under so much pressure anymore, and that's why they leave the house without taking the keys. In other words, it means they decided to leave and never come back. Even so, the voice keeps judging it, saying that she's just making things up and making her suffering seem less important. It says, "You wanted this." These are the screams that repeat in every verse. From then on, this hypocritical and compassionless judgment keeps hammering in the person's head. A person who has an addiction or disorder doesn't live in this situation because they want to. They may have made wrong decisions that led them to that point, but you can believe they didn't want to be like that. They already carry a very heavy and difficult burden. So instead of just being one more person to make things harder, why not help this person? Why not make a positive difference in their life? And the worst part is that many of these judgments come from religious people who preach love for others. That's why a lot of people believe that this song also has a religious layer in its interpretation. In fact, Serj himself has already said in an interview that the lyrics are an open letter to God, and that a certain part of the lyrics, which in my humble opinion is the coolest part of the song, came about practically as a divine intervention. What happened was this. Darren had already written the chorus and Serj had already added most of the lyrics, but there was still a section of the song, which they call the point, that still needed to be written for the song to finally be complete. Serj says he was racking his brain, trying to come up with some lyrics that would fit that section and match the vibe of the song, but nothing was coming out. That's when his producer, Rubin, suggested that Serj take a break and visit him at his house. At Rick's house, there was a beautiful and huge library filled with books of all kinds. Serj asked if Rick had any ideas about what to put in that section. Rick just pointed to the bookshelf and told Serj to grab one. Anyone, without looking. Serj picked the first book he could reach. Rick then told Serj, to open it to any page and read the first sentence he found, and the sentence he found was this. "Here, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit."
Father, into your hands I commend my spirit.
Creepy, right? Another esoteric lyric coming up in the style of Gangsta's Paradise and Stairway to Heaven, which we've already deciphered here, Serj. He already said he was surprised at how that happened, and amazed at how incredible Rick Rubin's intuition was for these things. The drummer John Dolmayan has even commented on it. The magic of Rick. It's like he can take a song, make a small suggestion, and it makes a huge, incredible difference when the song is finished. But Rick's intervention didn't stop there, as guitarist Darren said. The part where we say, "you want it to," that's exactly the kind of suggestion Rick Rubin would make. He always tries to get us to put something in the song that the audience can shout or sing along to, and it really works a lot. The book that appears isn't the Bible, but this more religious passage fit perfectly with the theme and vibe of the song. "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." It is known as the last phrase spoken by Jesus Christ at the moment of his death. And right after that, the lyrics say, "Why have you forsaken me?" which is also another phrase spoken by Christ. And it complements one of the meanings of the song. Religions believe that people who commit suicide go to hell or simply cannot make the passage. Their soul keeps wandering and suffering eternally. So this line would fit perfectly as a criticism of that point of view. If everyone can repent and be welcomed into paradise, why would some be abandoned? And remember, I said they didn't have 1% of the fame they have today. Well, that turned upside down on September 4th, 2001, when they released the band's second album, Toxicity. Besides Chop Suey, the album featured hits like the title track.
Yo, what are you on the wall? How do you on this order?
Aerials.
We're one in the river and one again after the fall.
And several others that made the album reach #1 on the charts in the United States. Exactly 1 week after the release, and right in the second week of September 2001. But you know what happened on that date in New York, right? The bassist Shavua Dejian has already talked about the craziness in an interview, which was getting a call from his mother telling him about the tragedy. And seconds later, another call came in. On the line, it was his manager congratulating him because his album had just reached #1. It was a moment of intense confusion for the band, for the fans, for everyone. People were in a panic. And the problem with that is, in those moments, human ignorance comes out in an absurd way. Because of the song lyrics, people started to believe that the band somehow knew what was going to happen. The phrases self-righteous suicide from Chop Suey, Aerials in the Sky from the song Aerials, and the very title of the song Jet Pilot, also from the same album. They were enough to unleash all the hatred and prejudice among the population. To make matters worse, Americans became even more prejudiced against foreigners. And that included the members of System, who, although most were born in Los Angeles, were all of Armenian descent. In fact, the Armenian flag even appears in the music video for Chop Suey. And in an innocent attempt to calm the city, SOAD took an action that would end up putting the lives of everyone in the band at risk. He published a text on the official System of a Down website, where he addressed the failure of American foreign policy and blamed the relentless thirst for Middle Eastern oil. Because of what happened, he also said that the solution was diplomacy, not war. But the plan backfired. People thought the band was trying to justify the attacks, and several American radio stations and media agencies began accusing System of a Down of supporting terrorism. Things got so bad that Sony, their record label, had to take the text down from the website to keep the situation from getting worse. But it was already too late. Within seconds, the band members started receiving several death threats. The worst part is that SOAD had written and posted that text without consulting or informing the other band members, which made the rest of the group really upset with him. As he said in an interview at the time, nobody wanted to listen. There was a lot of flag waving and a lot of hatred. The band called me and said, "Are you trying to get us killed?" And I said, "But it's the truth, isn't it?" They said, "We know it's the truth, but who cares? Why do you want us to get killed?" I've always been naive in thinking that if something is true, then it should be said, and I'm still very naive. To save the band's skin, SOAD had to explain himself live on The Howard Stern Show, a famous American radio program. The band had definitely gone from heaven to hell, and when they thought things couldn't get any worse, they discovered something bizarre. Clear Channel, one of the largest radio conglomerates in the United States, had just published a list of 160 songs that shouldn't be played on the radio because they contained sensitive content, given what the country was going through at the time. On that list was the song Chop Suey, and with the song banned, they once again found themselves in a dead end. To be honest, it could have been worse, you know? Take Rage Against the Machine, for example. The guys had literally all of their songs banned. But unlike Rage, System was still starting to establish themselves, and they needed to find a way around this situation. That's when they realized there was a loophole. The ban was only for radio, not for music videos. At the time, music television was huge, and that was the golden opportunity for the guys to save their album. The band posted an announcement on their website, inviting fans to take part in the recording of a music video. The recording would be directed by Marco Siega, who had already made videos for Blink-182 and Papa Roach. About 1,500 people signed up to take part in the video. Just so you know, since the band wasn't that well known yet, if they did this today, they'd need at least a whole stadium for sure, due to the band's low budget. The recording took place in the parking lot of a motel, the Oak Tree Inn in Los Angeles. As Chavo said, that motel where we filmed was on the same street where I grew up. In Hollywood, I was a skateboarding kid. I must have been about 12 or 13 years old. I used to skateboard. In the parking lot of that motel, there were gangs, prostitutes, and homeless people. I witnessed a sexual act for the first time in my life through one of those windows. I was traumatized. I went back home and told my mom, and then I thought, why don't we go back there, set up a stage, and invite our fans for a show? And Marco Siega even commented, the motels were rented by the hour, the TVs showed pornography, there were syringes. I really didn't venture into many rooms, but when we filmed that part where Serge is eating, we gathered as many people as possible. Right there. It was pretty disgusting, man. It might have been gross, but I keep thinking how lucky those people were to be there with the band before they were famous, you know? And how proud of that memory each one of them must feel nowadays. Actually, System was just starting to blow up that year. And the most ironic thing is that the band only made the band's popularity grow even more, like Darren said in an interview. In music, that's a badge of honor. So many great rock bands have been banned. It's almost like you're not part of the cool crowd if you've never been banned once or twice. Music Television promoted the music video heavily, bringing Chop Suey to an audience that had never heard of System of a Down before. That's when Darren started to suspect that their lives would never be the same again. We were on tour when the video was released. I hadn't even seen it yet, but we went to a mall and suddenly people recognized us. Can we take a picture with you? That shit had never happened to me before.
People scare the hell out of me when they shout, "Wake up," behind me, out of nowhere in public. Wake up, and I'm like, damn, man. Seriously? Wow. I'm glad you're excited, but don't do that.
Yeah, there's no way, man. When the music is that good, there's no way not to go wild like with this other anthem here.
Tried so hard and got so far.
If you lived through the 2000s, you definitely still enjoy this song today. But did you know that this Linkin Park hit has bizarre similarities with the sad life story of the late vocalist Chester Bennington? To better understand what I'm talking about, just click on this video. Thank you so much for your company, and I'll see you in the next video.